In the next 15 minutes, I would like to give you the benefits and the business impact that venture clienting offers to you as a corporate and also to you as an innovator. And then I'm going to zoom in on talent and teams. By show of hands, who of you knows the term venture clienting? Let me see in the chat. Okay, so let's start with that. I will cover this a bit in the beginning, and then we dive into the HR perspective. So I'm going to show my slides now. Do you see it? Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, let's dive into the first part. So what is venture clienting, and why are startups relevant for large corporates? So the innovation game has changed dramatically over the last 15 years. The way large corporates innovate changed dramatically over the last 15 years. I show you a study from MIT. They interviewed 500 large corporates and asked them, what are the sources of innovation for you? And those corporates answered, well, in the past, it have been R&D and our associates and also suppliers. But today, those are the startups. Startups offer innovation in speed and radicalness that large corporates struggle to offer. Startups are not only a growing source for innovation, they're even one of the biggest sources for large corporates. And why is that? There are three reasons for that, and I'm going to jump into them right now. First one, technology change. Very easy. You know that. We don't need to go into this too deep. The costs to found a startup have dropped dramatically. So in the 1990s, wanted to found a startup, you needed a couple of millions to buy a server, to hire people, to program code, to get your business done. Today, with a few €1,000, you can create a startup. We have open source, horizontal scaling. We have lots of freelancer platforms. Now we have ChatGPT. So it became quite cheap and easy. That's number one. And the technology change is also shifting to the adoption quote of great solutions. On the right side, you see LinkedIn needed 3,000 days to reach 100 million users. Threads from Facebook, not even a week. So the technology change is pressing, and that is changing the way large corporates innovate as reason number one. Reason number two, we are now coming out of the decade of cheap money. The last decade, interest rates have been low, money has been cheap, and capital was moving to riskier assets. And startups, as one form of risky assets, have been flooded with money. You see over here in light blue the R&D spendings of the large corporates, and you see in dark blue columns the VC investment volumes. And the first quarter 2021 was bigger than the whole year 17. There was so much money in the system. That is the second reason why the innovation game changed dramatically. Now we see that interest rates are rising again, and we see a shift from focus on growth and top line to efficiency and bottom line, but still the money's in the system and we still see awesomely funded startups. That's number two. Number three, the working world has changed dramatically. We also don't need to go into this too deep. You know this. I'm a great fan of systems theory. I like this, the concept of blue and red systems. I tried to put this in the back here of those mid-journey pictures. On the left side, you see the old-fashioned way, the way large corporates, mostly in manufacturing, are still working. And on the right side, you see rather the startup way of working. Innovation needs value-driven and process-free and ambiguity-tolerant environment. Because innovation does not happen in hubs, labs, or garages. Innovation happens when a passionate talent falls in love with a problem and has the commitment to solve it. That's when innovation happens. And this is more likely on the right side in these new ways of working than in the old ways of working. And also Corona did his part on it. So the innovation game changed dramatically over the last 15 years since Nokia was humiliated by Apple through the introduction of the iPhone. Everybody is talking about organizational ambidexterity. You know this term. Ambidexterity is the two-handedness. How can I, on the one hand, serve my customers highly standardized and produce very efficiently, and on the other hand, at the same time, innovate my business disruptively, creatively, innovatively every once in a while. And large corporates struggle to do that. They struggle to do that, and they need startups to bring in this innovation. Startups offer innovation in much more radicalness and speed than corporates offer. So the three trends, technology change, cheap money, and the changes of the working world had three effects on large corporates. And I'm going to give you those at the example of Bosch. I see some old Bosch colleagues, I see Silke Quast in the line, and further colleagues who maybe can jump on this later. I'm interested in the discussion. So the first thing, Bosch and other large corporates, they needed to review their opinion of top startups. When I went into a Bosch plant in 2018 and asked the plant manager, hey, what do you think is a startup? He answered, well, that's an 18-year-old IT student who likes to code and who has a business idea now. That's not my image of a top startup. A top startup are experienced founders. They have a long history and a long experience in one domain, in one function, in one industry. They have identified a pain point and they're strongly committed to solve it. And they're massively funded. So I want to give you one example here there are many examples out there. I know the Stordo CEO, Doron Meyersdorf, quite well, and I think Stordo is a great example there. It's an Israeli company founded in 2012. They make quickly loading batteries, and they raised the Series A 2014, and they raised 120 million. At the time where they had about 10 to 12 associates. Which Bosch department with 10 or 12 associates has 120 million budget to develop one product? So the relation between capital and resource availability on the one hand to business focus on the other hand is totally flipped within the top startups. It's not anymore like, oh, we are big Bosch and this little startup wants to be with us. No, it's like Bosch is meeting top startups on eye level. And that was the first effect the innovation game change had on large corporates. Large corporates had to admit the power of massively funded startups, and they had to review their opinion of them. That's number one. Number two, large corporates had to review their internal R&D spending. So Bosch is a very proud engineering company, 7 billion in R&D, which is a lot, but it's still peanuts compared to the global tech venture capital out there. And venture capital is actually free R&D budget that large corporates can use without raising that money, without investing that money. They can make use of the startup solutions without spending that money to develop it. They can just partner with them. With those startups, they can be an easy client to those startups. And that was the second effect. Large corporates had to review their image on internal R&D spending and had to leverage external venture capital as internal R&D spending. Number three, large corporates also had to become an easy client, had to become an easy partner. When Bosch wanted to meet a startup before venture clienting, before Open Bosch, they rented a minibus and drove 16 engineers and 5 lawyers to the startup CEO to assess risks. That's not an easy and lean way to get into this partnership. But what is an easy client? What is an easy partner? It's not a risky client partnering with every startup or testing every solution. An easy client is a person who exactly understands the pain point and exactly understand their own problem, have the evaluation competence to identify a better solution. So that startup does help me and that startup does not help me, and have the commitment to solve it. Commitment in corporate terms is budget and capacity. And then they're acting fast. And acting fast means, for me, in my terms, in venture clienting terms, an NDA in 2 hours. Ordering overnight, that is an easy client. So this is now where we come to venture clienting at Bosch. 2018, the board of management of Bosch Group basically told Bosch Ventures, hey, what is your contribution into what is your contribution to a more innovative Bosch? Bosch Ventures had at that time two business modes. One was venture capital, a very strong venture capital doing since 2007, 900 million assets under management and doing 15 deals per year, ticket size 5 to 10 million. Bosch likes to lead, but also follows. And Bosch was really successful in earning profits by buying and selling shares of startups. But Bosch has been really lousy, and also other corporates have been really lousy to use this process of venture capital to do innovation. The portfolio of the overlap between portfolio invested and portfolio implemented was very few percent, not dramatic. That's why we had developed the venture clienting model and founded Open Bosch. Also looking at other corporates, BMW, BSH, there are other corporates with a very similar process. And Open Bosch is an internal service provider who is pulling the demands internally, is not investing. It's just being a client, positioning Bosch as a partner for those startups, and organizing a dedicated process that is pulling those demands, matching them with the startup ecosystem, and preventing Bosch from inventing the wheel again. Because large corporates are mostly very good at taking 100 million and 500 people to develop something for the next 5 years that you can buy at that startup over there for 1,000 euro today. And to prevent large corporates from inventing the wheel again, you need to have this grab into the ecosystem, startup ecosystem, and you need to have a lean process that helps you, a very cost-efficient lean process that helps you to do that. So that's venture clienting. Now I talked a lot, sorry. Are there any questions? Any questions on venture clienting? Are you still there? Can you hear me? Did everybody, did I put it to sleep?
Still there.
We're still here.
Yeah, still here, great. Okay, so then let's step, last slide on this one. This is the venture clienting operating model. Just focus on the light blue steps. So it's about activating the business units. It's about scoping a project and really identifying this pain point and filtering the pain points that have commitment and are of strategic relevance. And then it's about sourcing startups on this demand, specifically for this demand, assessing them, buying the solution. You don't buy the startup. You buy the solution, right? The philosophy is, if you want to use an iPhone to become more innovative, why do you buy Apple stock? Buy an iPhone, right? So it's about a very lean and quick contracting of this product or solution of the startup, testing it, and then adopting what works and scaling internally. That's the venture clienting process. So a pure push process, and there are many corporates since 2018 who do this very professionally, who have a dedicated team, a dedicated budget, mostly a dedicated brand. I just saw in the participants list Christoph Sommer, who's from NEW, a German energy company. He's the head of venture clienting of that company. So there are many corporates out there who already adopted their own venture clienting process. And now, if you don't have any further questions, I would like to dive into the teams and talent perspective of this process.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Hi, Christian. So it's Silke here.
Hi, Silke.
You already mentioned. Hi, ex-colleague. I would like to pose this one question. It's about a cultural fit, because what I saw when you have fast startups that are able to explore and to work on new topics, but when they come into a big corporation, I'm put on my video, I'm sorry for that. When they come into big corporations, you see a different culture, and very, very often the competency of a startup is kept in the heads of the people. So if the culture does not fit and the people quit after buying or collaborating with a startup, then all the knowledge is gone. So what is your impression about that?
So that is actually a great topic, because it's about corporate startup DJs. How do you have people who organize to bring to adjust the two levels of speed in innovating through this? And the venture client unit actually plays this ambassador role. Is basically the ship, the speedboat in front of the big tanker, who is taking this media role and is taking care of it, is also conserving the knowledge and is covering the business impact perspective. Because what you always get the engineers if you talk about the business case. If you talk about culture, you always fearing away the people, right? So you don't need to, there's the fear to step into the blame game, right? At large corporates, the blame game, for example, like, oh,
the processes.
Yes, exactly. For example, like, oh, legal is so slow. No, purchasing is so slow. Oh, we need to deal with IT. And that's very difficult because everybody's working in his roles, have their own KPIs, has their own incentivation. And the people are not blocking it because they're stupid or because they don't want to, but because they're optimizing themselves in their role. And if you blame the persons and if you don't change the role, if you don't change the incentivation, then nothing changes. Right? Because it's always to have a systemic perspective on what is actually the role and the ways we are working, and don't talk about the persons, talk about the incentivation. And then the venture clienting unit helps to take the mediation. Let me dive into this with the next slides. I love the question, and I would love to discuss this further afterwards. It's a great question. It's exactly you put again the finger into the pain. Let me see. Do you see the slides again? Okay, so my lessons learned on the cultural patterns and the perspective on talent and teams in venture clienting. First thing, there are obvious success factors. That is to have a consistent pull process, to have a high quality startup solutions scouting, to have budget and capacity, and to have a very lean process in alignment with legal, purchasing, and IT to do this. Then you can raise innovation efficiency. But what is mostly forgotten about are the hidden factors. This is, do you have a community of talented detectives that really look for the pain points, that identify the pain points, that filter the ones that are of strategic relevance, and that really have commitment? Because mostly at large corporates, you often have the situation that you're in a room and many people say, oh yeah, we should innovate this process. Yeah, we should do this or this product. Everybody agrees on it. And then when it comes to, okay, who's going to do that? Oh, no, I'm not going to do. Are you? No, I'm not going to do. So then you don't have this responsibility. So you really need to have this filter and the talented detectives who filter that. And you need to have the cultural openness in leadership. And with openness, I'm not talking about, again, about persons, like, hey, be open. That doesn't help anything. It's about on the incentivation level, on the organizational development level, having the openness and so that the roles have the freedom to be open. That is really moving the needle. That is the speed of transformation that brings in. And that is the need of the following factors. First thing is the blame game. So thank you, Silke. We already talked about that. Have a systemic perspective on it. Don't blame people, blame the roles. Number two is there are many different roles in venture clienting. If you start as a corporate, if you start venture clienting, mostly the first person, the process owner, has all of those roles. So this person is bringing in the pain points, is bringing in the venture clients itself, is owning the process and administrating it globally, is sitting maybe even in the business unit and has this venture ambassador role, has the know-how of the products and the process of the business unit, has the network to gain the pain points and to identify the relevant topics, and also is offering then as a venture associate or venture analyst the landscapes and the comparison and the startup technologies out there that could offer benefit for that problem. And then you, of course, need marketing to talk about it and to scale this process. So in the beginning, mostly the first person has all those roles, but with more volume, this is differentiating out of the process. And what you now need for this first person and also then for the follow-on persons are corporate startup DJs. I call them corporate startup DJs. What do I mean by that? Corporate startup DJs are basically associates who have two discs, who have one disk which is highly standardized, scaling globally with a strong process orientation and the firm customer base, like the corporate disk, right? But it's mostly very slow, not because the people are slow, but because the processes are slow. and are process driven and have no room for ambiguity or risk, but they have to focus on exploiting the business, right? We are back to organizational ambidexterity with exploit and explore. So those people, the corporate startup DJ I'm talking about, they have experience in a corporate. At the same time, they have been working in a startup. They have experienced in working in a startup environment. They have even maybe found a startup and now know how it feels like if you work in a pivotal team, in an unstable setup, if you have no firm customer base, if you're working in small teams, and if it's about you, it's not about the process, but it's about you as a talent. And there are lots of ambiguity to cover. And this is a totally different way of working. And the people who know both sides, who have founded startups, but who are also worked in a corporate role, there are not many, but there are some, maybe even in your corporate. And to identify them is the first step. Because if you have a corporate startup DJ, they have the ability to play this mediator role, to make sure that you don't need to you do not need to scale up the startup, slow down the startup, and you don't want to push the corporate. Everybody is good in their ways, but you need one mediator who's making sure that you have the process to test and adopt the startup quickly. So number one, look for this corporate startup DJs and enable a career path for them to get started. Right? Those DJs mostly have also the ability to deal with complex organizations, right? Because decision-making in a startup is totally different than decision-making in a corporate. I try to visualize that here in this visualization. You have the budget owner who's not mostly the gatekeeper, who's not the connector. You have many different roles. And if you want to change a process or change a product within a corporate, then you need to put the puzzle pieces together and discuss and work with all of those. The next one is the career path. When my experience is innovation is mostly not a career path in large corporates. When I look at Bosch, I love Bosch. It's a great company, strong brand, is attracting strong talent, great people, but still in its roots, it's still a military organization. And if you want to make a career at Bosch, you're working either in sales or in controlling, or you work in manufacturing. 2/3 of the managing director boards of Bosch are former plant managers, technical or commercial plant managers. So if you want to make a career at Bosch, you create your own little kingdom. You create your own product, or you have your own team, and then you get attention, and then you make a career. If you now bring in a startup that already developed today what you are trying to develop with your team for the next 3 years, then you don't make a career. So we have a systemic problem in the career paths. Mostly supporting functions like innovation and ventures is not leading you to become CEO. And this is then what I try to visualize over here is, if you are head of venture clienting at a large corporate, there are mostly not too many functions that you can grow your career on continuously. Mostly you have to go back to the classical functions like manufacturing or sales or similar product-oriented functions, or you can stay in this venturing scene, but you have to leave the corporate, or you have to switch over to consulting to a startup, or you can add further venturing formats like venture building or CVC, but it's mostly very difficult. This role is not going to lead you to a corporate CEO career. And I think this is a pity, because if you want to change large corporates, you also need to display the different roles of organizational ambidexterity. I call them goalie and striker in the boards. So what is a goalie? A goalie is a person, like I have this image of soccer. If a goalie gets 10 shoots into to his goal and he's letting in one, everybody's mad at him. Everybody's like, come on. And a striker is shooting 10 times, and if he's shooting a goal once, everybody's cheering him. Everybody's like, yeah, that's great. So there's a totally different risk and success perspective on it. And this for me stands a little bit like on this exploitation game and on the exploration game. So the goal is they try to avoid risk. Because if you want to make a career, you try not to make any mistakes, and then you can grow your career. If you are trying to play a portfolio and you say, like Helen in the keynote before, talking about rates of failure, if the striker is failing, this is fully okay, because within the portfolio thought, it is fine if he is successful one time and the other 9 times he is failing. That is still a great ratio. But we don't mostly have this mindset in the boards of the corporates, because the classical career path is on the exploitation side. So that's why I'm advocating for having something like a CVO, or it doesn't need to be a separate role, but it can be a CTO, CDO, a CIO. There can be functions already established that cover this striker perspective, that cover this risk and portfolio play perspective on innovation and ventures in the board. I'm showing you here an exemplified org chart. Ant Group is one of the companies who established a chief entrepreneur who's basically covering this. And I like the idea. I don't want to advocate for new roles, but I want to advocate for having this mindset of goalie and striker, of organizational ambidexterity with exploitation and exploration, also represented in the profiles of the people in the board of a large corporate. I'm talking very fast. Are you still with me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Another thought. You can't read that slide. That's on purpose. It's just I want to show you the toolbox of corporate venturing. Large corporates mostly have a toolbox of innovation formats, and in this toolbox you have many different tools: M&A, venture capital, venture clienting, venture building, incubation, acceleration, hackathons, co-working, shared services, trend scouting, landscaping, spin-offs, equi-hiring, intrapreneurship. I don't know. You probably know even more of those tools. And I don't want to blame any of the tools. All of those tools are legitimate, but all of those tools also have advantages and disadvantages. And they have different cost setups and a different setup of being lean. And my experience is that mostly in corporates, you don't have on leadership level, but also on operational use case level, not the experience in differentiating those tools. I met corporates who said, we want to develop products, that's why we do hackathons. What? No, hackathons are a recruiting tool. You meet talent over there. If you want to develop products, especially if they should be rooted in the business unit, don't do hackathons. Or I met corporates who say, we want to become more innovative. That's why we do venture capital. What? No, venture capital is a profitable business. And if you have the budget and the volume to do 100 deals per year, ideally, 90 of the deals are crap and 8 are okay, and to pay the whole fund. But if you want to become more innovative, if that's the target, then there are much more lean and cost-efficient ways to do that. So also looking again at the board, and also at the leadership, not on the top management, but also at the innovation leadership. Innovation leadership can be middle management, can be even operational management. Do you have the competence to choose the right tool, and do those teams have experience in using the tool? So if you want to put a nail into the wall, don't take the screwdriver for that, take the hammer for that. And this also, looking at the toolbox of corporate venturing formats, do you have the competence and the experience in all those tools? And also to let them play together. Because what I learned in venture clienting is great to get started, but it's not the right process for developing the 10 billion new product or business model. That is rather an M&A case or maybe a CVC case or something else. But venture clienting is rather a tool to minimally invasive transform your organization over here and over here and over here and over here, and through this large volume to bring in great startup solutions and transform your company. And this perspective is mostly missing startup solutions are not a purpose in itself, right? It's not about dealing with startups. The target is to become more innovative and more competitive. I talked about innovation leadership, and I want to come back to this perspective on the profile corporate startup DJ, who is rather a detective than a captain. And mostly also in large corporates, we have in the HR systems, in the term leadership, or in this visual of leadership, this strong captain in mind who is taking decisions and going forward. But that's not what is necessary in large corporates. In large corporates, it's mostly the systemic education and the understanding of how large corporates work and how the cultural patterns are in between. And then it's the profile of the detective who really understands the problem. It's not about finding solutions first, it's about understanding the problem. If you find solutions too early, you're running into the wrong directions. You need to find this, to understand the problem first. Now, specifically in venture clienting here, I like this visualization of the pain point and this detective position. Mostly in large corporates, innovation pain points are too early or too late. So sometimes the operational business unit or the use case owner, the pain point owner, is not ready to get started with a startup, or it's already too late because they are working with a startup. And sometimes they have use case addressed way too broad. For example, hey, find me a startup in AI and automotive. But what is AI in automotive? There are 80,000 startups out there doing AI in automotive, right? That's too broad. But also not too narrow, thinking about an API to connect two software pieces, that is too narrow. So the detective needs to have the right timing and scope analysis tools to do this. How to get started? Mostly in large corporates, you need the success stories to get the budget. You need the budget to get the success stories, and you need the top management to get the budget. So mostly you're just running around and you don't get started because all those three parts are depending on each other. So also looking at HR or talent and teams, the first person doing venture clienting in a corporate needs to have the talent to tackle one of those, ideally the top management, to start winning the top management to build this process top down, because doing innovation bottom up for a whole organization is very difficult. It takes long endurance. This is difficult. So the ability of a profile is also to have this. At Bosch, this was a luxury situation. Stefan Hartung is pushing this, and this is why Open Bosch is successful today. Branding, also having this marketing competence, having a brand, and creating a cult. How do you create a cult of innovators, a community of innovators that is helping you to gain the pain points? Because if you have the right process and the tools, that doesn't move the needle. What's moving the needle is if you have the people within the organization who understand the process and who really pull the startup solutions, who have the interest to get those startup solutions and test them. That's what's moving the needle. To get involved with you guys again, I would like to close with this slide here and get into the discussion. So mostly when we look at talent and teams in innovation management or specialized in venture clienting, we are looking at organizational setup and we're looking about processes and building blocks in IT and stuff. But mostly we are not covering the individuals, and we're not covering the environmental patterns to make this happen. And I think this discussion on how's leadership equipped to tackle organizational ambidexterity with exploitation and exploration equally, not equally in kind, but equally in value. This is one. And then, do you have the corporate startup DJs who get this process started and who help with a systemic perspective on the organization to push things through and talking to the roles, not talking to the persons, talking to the roles? And I would like to get into the discussion with you guys. Are you still awake? Are you still there? Okay, let's see you. Any questions? What's the time saying? Are we still in?
Yes, we still have time. So if anyone has a question, feel free to either
Jamie
write
has a
it in the
question.
chat. Yeah, awesome.
No one's going to go, I'll jump in. So you talk a lot about big companies like Bosch. What
Yes.
about maybe like SMEs, small
Yes.
organizations, 400 people? How does this
Same
change
thing.
or how do we apply them?
Same thing, because venture clienting. Now let's first look at the process and then at the HR perspective. The process is so cost efficient and lean, right? You're not buying the startup and need 2 million or what to do it. You can, with a few €1,000, buy the solution of the startup and get started. So the process is so cost efficient and lean that it's actually dedicated to SMEs. Actually, SMEs are should be before they do hackathons or venture capital or something else, they should do venture clienting. And now if you look at HR, an organization bigger than 15, 20 people already develops those patterns. If you take an organization of 400, they have the same issues. They have the same lack of career paths in exploration. They mostly have the same risk aversity. They have the same patterns. I think it's not about the size of 100,000. It starts with, if you have more than 10, 20 people, you start to develop by nature those patterns. And this is okay. I don't want to say, hey, you large corporate need to change. No. You don't need to change. You just need to organize this mediator role. Then it's helping. Does it answer the question? Yeah, great, thanks.
So we have another question in the chat from Stephen. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Mhm. Yeah, hi again, Christian. Great talk. I liked your analogy with the corporate startup DJs, and I recognize that need for the two skill sets. How easy is it for corporates to find these people already within their ranks? Can they just go look around the corridors of power and find these people hidden away somewhere, or they really need to start looking outside for these people?
Thanks for the question. I like the question. So the first question I ask when I come into a corporate, I ask the people for their side hustles. And if they talk about it openly, then it's probably not an issue. Then you probably have those people already internally, right? So side hustle for me is especially in innovation and ventures, most of the people, they thought before founding a startup, or they have already a side hustle, or they have something on the side that they grow out their hobby. So if you ask them for side hustles, and they proudly say, yes, I have a side hustle, and I'm in my free time I'm selling on Amazon, and it's allowed to talk about it, and the cultural patterns of the organization are open to talk about it, then it's probably very easy to identify them, and then you probably have a lot of them. If you ask this question and you don't find the openness, and they don't talk about it, I don't know, then it's probably difficult. Then you need to bring in the external ones. So I'm working with a headhunter who's finding those people, those corporate startup DJs, and I'm also training those people, especially in venture clienting, if they need the skill. So there are possibilities to bring in external people, but I think to take internal people is king, because what a perfect corporate startup DJ already has is the network internally and the know-how of the products and the processes. And if you have to bring in an external person who just have to learn this, then it's really difficult to organize this network effect, and then sometimes the immune system of the organization is blocking out those people. So it's better if you find them internally. If you don't have them internally, you can find them outside, and still then you have the task to review how do you treat side hustles and entrepreneurial spirit within the corporate. Does it answer the question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a great, could you call it like a leading indicator almost of how much of this talent you're going to find in-house?
Yes. Good questions. Is Silke still in the line? Or did she show? She knows the slides then. Who else?
We do have one from Arnav as well.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. You asked me, did I get you right?
Yes. So Silke, now that I finished the second part, are there? What do you think? Are there points you disagree with? I like to have the discussion, especially with a person like you who knows Bosch very well or who has lots of experience in large corporates. Would you agree with some of my points, or would you disagree?
For sure. I liked very much your sketch in the end when you described how to organize this, because I've been in an internal startup, and so you have to every organizational culture has its right at a certain stage, and this is the maturity of this organization, and this is organizational design. So if a startup grows, it has to get to processes, for example. I experienced this on my own.
Yes.
So you have to orchestrate this within a company. And what I experienced, and I heard this last week and the week before in this round, is the importance of an innovation strategy. This gives the border, the framework of where to do your innovation. And if this is lacking, and I heard that it's rather often lacking because it's very hard to do a strategy, because doing a strategy is focusing, and focus means I choose the one and the other I do not choose at the moment. And this is quite hard, because perhaps you have to explain afterwards, if the other solution is being made by another company, for example, then you are to blame because you sorted it out. So that's why people do not focus, and that's the problem with the lack of innovation strategy. But in very early stages, you probably will not be able to have something calculated like a risk or something like that. That's entrepreneurial mindset. You have to choose from a certain kind of a gut feeling. That's why you need experienced people.
Yes.
So, and this is quite hard. And I experienced that the last talks that we had here in this learning lab several times, that it's so hard to have a good innovation strategy, but you need it.
Yes, I agree.
Christian,
yes.
I had a question for you as well.
Yes.
If you flip the perspective and I ask you from a startup who's starting to build products for large corporate venturing, possibly to create partnerships with them, what would your suggestions be for them?
My suggestion is, well, there are many suggestions in terms of what, and winning a client as a large corporate as a client, or being successful, or what do you?
No, I mean, like when you set up a partnership, to make this partnership an equal partnership, to make sure that there is a synergy between the two units.
Yes.
How would you ensure that from a?
I mean, the first recommendation is very easy. Look for venture client units, because they, by function, have understood the issues. And I'm talking about various issues. I'm talking on process level. So, does the corporate have a standard legal terms that you can commit to? Like most of the large corporates say, all the IP we do here is ours. That doesn't work, right? Or do they mostly then have startup-friendly payment terms? They know how you do a cloud onboarding. They know how you do a sandboxing. So in terms of legal purchasing IT, do they have the process standards to get into the corporation quickly? If you have a venture client unit, the startup can be sure that that this is set. But the venture client units are also only working in the pool. So if you don't know your customer, if you don't have customer centricity already in focus, and you know what the pain point is, then it will be difficult to get in large corporates. And then I would recommend to start with smaller companies, because also a venture client unit doesn't do sales for you. You need to bring already your client. So customer centricity is the most important. If you don't know your customer yet and you just want to win a Bosch or a large corporate, you need to have already a very precise identification of the persons you are heading to. Thank you.
We have another question in the chat from John, and then we can get to Art afterwards. And he was unable to unmute, so he asked, any specific fields within venture clienting in which you would prefer to hire externals over hiring and training internals?
Any specific fields. So does this require, do you think of functions or industries, or what is the level you're thinking on, John? Any specific fields within the venture client you would like to prefer hiring externals? So I mean, it's always good to start with the person who has set up a venture client unit, right? There are in Europe probably 250, maybe 200 venture client units. And venture clienting is in for since 2017, 18. So there are already a lot of people who have established venture client units and know the hurdle and have painfully done this journey. And if you start at zero, then it probably makes sense to bring in a person who has already done it. Yes. Apart from that, I would always, because venture clienting is a pull process and it's focusing on the internal pain point, I would always focus more on the network within the corporate and the technology competence and the evaluation competence of the processes. That is of higher value than an innovative person. Because innovative persons, there are a lot, but if you don't know the corporate, if you don't, especially in large corporates, if you don't have the network to raise those leads and to filter them, and if you don't have the standing grown internally, to deny topics, right? Also to say, oh, that's not an innovation field. That's not a startup topic. Let's not do that. If you don't have that, then it's difficult. That's why bringing in experts from externally, if they have experience if you have to have the profile and have experience in doing this, yes, why not? If you have internal colleagues, always prefer the internals. Does that answer the question, or is that?
I think he'll probably, yep, it does in the chat. Awesome. Next up, we have Art.
Yes, Christian, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
You know, a question, actually, two quick questions. One question is about early stage startup, which is still validating a problem. Yes. And does the venture clienting works at that stage? And let's say venture client says, okay, come to my environment, validate in my specific environment, and also invest to that. Or venture clienting is mostly at the later stage of a startup where there is a product already, and the venture client becomes a client of that startup.
Yes, great question. So for the large corporates, I would recommend to start with Series A and above. If you have a bunch of students who have a concept, but they have nothing to test, then it's very difficult to deal with the large corporate who you need to convince, right? So Series A and above, if you have already convinced one investor or a business angel, a person who says, I like the product, I give you my own money because I think you're successful. If you have done this, this is a proof of concept. This is a pre-DD for most of the large corporates. I know many corporates who filter by Series A just because they don't have the time to look deep into the startup and evaluate them proficiently. Mostly they don't have the capacity to do that. So they say, okay, Series A and above, everything else has no chance. So in this sense, there are probably other ways to get in touch with corporates, right? There are networks, and there are also maybe one addition to that. Venture clienting for me is rather a transactional process than a transformational process like co-creation, right? It's about bringing in a lot of startups, fitting the demands, and bringing massive startup ecosystem power into the corporate. But it's rather with a lower share on value creation on the corporate side. Mostly it starts with a pilot, and then a venture partnering or a co-creation process starts after the pilot, and then it's a little bit like a different tool. But for me, venture clienting is really about speed and quick insights and not developing the wheel again. That's why it is rather focusing on more mature startups than on pre-seed seed teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a quick follow-up to your answer. Thank you for the answer. So let's say if it's a more mature startup, and the companies using that product, is there any process of clarifying the IP, a joint IP? Because a large company can say, okay, look, we shared so many insights. Now we also co-own these validated product, and that can actually hinder the growth of a startup, because then a corporate client can say, okay, it has to be exclusive for us at least for 1 year. You cannot release it to other clients in our industry segment, and that can actually create sort of misunderstanding.
Great question. Mostly you don't have that issue in mature venture client units because IP is excluded in the first pilot. That's exactly what I meant with don't rent a minibus and drive 16 engineers and 5 lawyers to the startup CEO to assess risks. Don't do that. Have in your standard terms that the startup's keeping their IP, the corporate is keeping their IP, and the pilot does not cover IP. It is quickly testing the solution, and after a pilot, which can be a 8 weeks, 3 month, 4 month process, really quick, after this pilot, then IP, because then you save the time on the startups you're kicking out anyway, because mostly mature venture client units have an adoption quote of 50% after the pilot. I think that's awesome. I don't want to have an adoption quote at 90% because then you're probably not scratching the disruptive topics, right? So adoption quote means what is the share of pilots that are ending into a customer supplier relationship or a joint venture or M&A or anything else, like a commitment with the client. 50% is great. But that means also that you're kicking out 50% after the pilot. And you don't want to have time-consuming negotiation talks about IP with those 50% of startups you're not going to work with. So that's why you make use of this pilot up front to get the insights quickly. Does this solution really fit what we're looking for? Position your corporate as a fair corporate, saying like large corporates with strong brands, they cannot afford stealing IP, right? That needs to be very clean. So they need the innovation power. They want to partner with startups. They want to be open. So they have very clear, specific terms that say, in the pilot, we don't cover IP. This is yours. After the pilot, let's talk about it. How can we work together? How does this look like? Are we interested in your IP? These talks I would always do after the pilot.